What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the Pika Pika Papa, and today we're going to be talking about all kinds of awesome grading data from PSA. We're going to look at the most graded characters, the most graded cards, the most graded sets. We're going to be looking at gem rates. We're going to be looking at how much of PSA's total grading volume is actually TCG, and it is going to blow your freaking mind when we get to that. Now, I want to acknowledge and align with the fact that, listen, not everybody's in this hobby to get things graded. Like, my biggest joy comes from sitting on the couch with my two young daughters and looking at their Pokemon binders, which are full of raw cards. They remember the shinies. They remember where they were when they pulled these cards. My youngest loves blue. She has pages and pages of blue cards. Doesn't care what they're worth, doesn't care what condition they are. Like, that is the purest form of joy in the hobby, and I love it so much. However, I'm a little bit older, and I do have some collecting and investing goals here. And truth be told, I want it all. I want awesome Pokemon. I want amazing artwork. I want them to come from big name sets, and I want the opportunity for all of those things to result in these cards growing in value over time. And so today we're going to talk about the grading volume at PSA, and to be honest with you, I think for me this represents how serious a lot of people are getting in terms of Pokemon and the long-term investment potential. Like, I know we talk about investing a whole lot here on the channel, but to hit these types of numbers, it means that investors are coming in from all over the place. Now, there's many different reasons people have cards graded. Sometimes you grade them just to encapsulate a memory. Me and my family do that all the time. I got PSA 7s and 8s of cards that have no business being in a PSA holder, but we wanted to solidify that memory and keep it special for the long term. But most people are sending it in because they think that either they can get a great grade and turn around and sell that card they just pulled soon to get some upside potential, or somebody like me, I get it graded because I think in 10, 15, 20 years from now, that card is going to multiply significantly in value in that PSA 10 holder, and that's what I'm going for. So when we talk about these numbers, I think it's just incredible because there's a lot of people who are coming in, a lot of people are getting cards graded, and I do think overall that makes me feel good because it tells me I'm not the only one who believes in the long-term prospects of Pokemon. There's a lot of people out there spending a lot of cash, and at the end of the day, it makes me feel really good. So what we're going to look at right here is this blue bar graph, which represents TCG cards graded at PSA by month. And you see this goes all the way back to January of 2022. And when you look at what has happened over the last 4 months on the right-hand side of this screen right here, I drew a little line straight across so you can see it. It has been amazing in terms of what the grading volume has looked at. Now, grading volume this month versus previous month is up actually 10% month over month. But if you look at over the last 4 months, there seems to be a little bit of a support line forming right at that 950,000 TCG cards graded per month. I got to giggle when I say that out loud. If you had asked me 1 year ago if we would ever get to the point where we're grading almost 1 million TCG cards per month, I probably would have said you're absolutely out of your mind. And I've been doing this for a very, very long time. But to see where we are today is really incredible. And look at where they were in the previous years, right? July of this year, we graded 969,000 TCG cards at PSA. In July of 2024, 411,000 cards were graded. July of 2023, 514,000 cards were graded, but that was the first month that they opened the grading center over in Japan. There was all kinds of pent-up demand. They opened it up in Japan, like I said, in the middle of 2023, and that thing just went absolutely nuts. So it's incredible to see how these things have grown in terms of grading volume over time. Now, I told you that I would share with you exactly what percentage of cards at PSA are represented by the TCG class. Check this out right here. Last month, 1.67 total items were graded at PSA. That includes everything: tickets, sports cards, anything you can think of at PSA. There was 1.67 million things graded, which was an all-time record. Never happened before. Highest of all time in a single month, 1.67 million. Out of that 1.67 million, 1.01 million were TCG and non-sports. So again, we focus on TCG. Non-sports is a very small part. But overall, TCG and non-sports represented a little over 1 million of that 1.67 million. So when you look at that, 60.47% of all of the items that went through PSA last month were TCG and non-sports. It's just incredible. Again, there's so many people who are fired up about this hobby. I think it is a great long-term opportunity, and I'm really excited to see so many people taking this part of the hobby. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about here is I have been doing this. This is my own little Pika Pika Papa graph that I started many, many moons ago. And what I did was I have been comparing grading volume at PSA from the TCG space versus what I call the ball sports, which is baseball, basketball, football. And I want you to take a step back. Even if you're not into any of those things, think about how big baseball, basketball, and football here is in the US. They are astronomically large. They have cult-like followings. It is just incredible. I am a huge football fan myself. Like, it's just incredible. And even with all of that fanfare, even with all of that money, even with it being plastered on television screens from coast to coast, almost 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, TCG card grading is far, far higher than baseball, basketball, and football combined. So when you look at this graph right here, the blue represents Pokemon, the orange represents ball sports, and you can see when I first started graphing this, they were kind of like heavyweight fighters. They were going back and forth. It was 1-for-1, and then ball sports pulled away for a little bit. But then what has happened over the last couple months, really in all of 2025, has been crazy. Pokemon is just absolutely starting to pull away, and it is not even close. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this transitions in the long run, because when I started doing this, the reason I started graphing this was because I felt early on that TCG was going to overtake these ball sports. It was going to become more popular. It was going to become, a much bigger part of the overall, alternative investment space, which it has become now. And that was one of the main reasons I got into this hobby. Was number one, because my kids loved it and it was something we could do together. But number two, I thought back then it was really undervalued. And as you can see, at least from a grading perspective, it's starting to pull away, and it's been really, really cool to watch. Now, the next thing we talk about is the most graded individual cards at PSA, and this is really, really interesting. So there are no Prismatic Evolution cards on here. There's a Prismatic Evolution promo card, but there are no regular Prismatic Evolution cards on here. And I started to think about the why, and I wonder, we know the pull rates aren't great, but listen, Evolving Skies had terrible pull rates too, and we still saw some of those cards pop on this list from time to time. I do think that there's more sealed collecting now that was going on back then, and again, if more things are kept sealed, then there's not as many cards out in the wild, but it's going to be very interesting to see what the first one is that's going to pop up on here. So again, the regular ETB, obviously the promo is on here, that EV, which is very cool to see. And what's interesting too, is I've been talking about this the last couple months, is the Japanese cards had really started to heat up. I mean, it has been very cyclical. This list of most graded cards, when we first started doing the series, was just absolutely hammered with English cards. There was almost no Japanese. Then we went through a 6-month period where it was all Japanese, and it's been very cyclical. The last couple months were heavy Japanese. Last month, 7 of the 10 cards on here were Japanese. The previous month, 6 of the 10 were Japanese. But this month, it swings heavy to the English side. There 3 of the 10 cards on here are Japanese. So I think it's really, really cool. The other thing too is I've been talking a lot about 151. We've been watching 151 come down in price. You've seen it starting to have a little bit of a bounce now. I'm not sure if it's going to keep going upwards, but no matter what, I think it's a great opportunity to get into 151. And guess what? You have the Charizard, you have the Blastoise on here. Obviously, the top 2 cards from that set popping up on here is a big thing. And the other thing I want to call out too is sometimes we talk about how grading volume can be a deterrent in order to long-term price appreciation, but Pikachu with gray felt hat over the last 20 months. Now think about everything that's happened in this hobby over the last 20 months. Out of all those 20 months, 19 of them, Pikachu with gray felt hat has appeared on this list. There has been over 86,600 of those cards sent to PSA for grading, and even with all of that value, or all that grading volume, as you know, that card's still ridiculously expensive. So again, you've got a really cool promo card that was relatively hard to get your hands on. You got awesome artwork, a big name like Pikachu. I talked about it earlier, like it checks every single box for me, so really excited to see that one up here. The other thing that's interesting too is you see some Journey Together cards on here. Journey Together Articuno, you got the Wailord on there. You're starting to see some really cool volume here in the Journey Together space. And when we think about how broader markets move, like a lot of times the whole market moves together, sometimes irrationally. That was one of the reasons I'd been so high on 151, is I said, listen, 151 is a set for the ages. The whole market's turning down. These cards are coming down with it, even though they probably shouldn't be. It's going to be a great time to buy some of these. Journey Together launched when the market was in the middle of a downturn. I'm not saying it's going to be a top 5 set. I'm not saying it's going to be a banger long term, but it is interesting. It certainly had a lot working against it. So we'll see what happens over the next 8-12 months if that set can start to gain some traction here moving forward. Now, as you would imagine, since we saw the 2 biggest cards from 151 make the most graded singles list a minute ago, you would expect Pokemon 151 to make it on the most graded sets list, right? Like, it just makes sense. But being in that number 1 spot, that just goes to show you that even though those 2 single cards, the Charizard, the Blastoise, were called out individually, a lot of these cards are being sent through for grading. Having English 151 at the top, Japanese Terrestrial Festival number 2, you've got Journey Together, we talked about that a minute ago, coming in at number 3. And then look at Sword and Shield's Crown Zenith. Crown Zenith is an incredible set. It's a very, very deep set. Sometimes it gets flown under the radar a little bit. Matter of fact, I've been talking about it over the last month. Those Elite Trainer boxes, I know that they're relatively expensive, but they're still looking really good. The Lucario promo card that is in there, I think that card's an interesting play. It's under $10 right now. Like, There is a lot to love about Crown Zenith in the long run. And then, even though in the previous slide we didn't see any singles cards on there from Prismatic Evolutions, Prismatic Evolution moves up a couple spots. It was number 7 last month. It's all the way up to number 5 right now, so that's awesome to see. And then Destined Rivals makes the list. So it'll be interesting to see if there are any singles cards from Destined Rivals, which ends up making on this over the next couple months. And then obviously, if English 151 is up there, Japanese 151 isn't far behind, making the top 10. But then you also got Surging Sparks. I am a huge fan of Surging Sparks. Again, it's still a relatively new set. There's a lot of Surging Sparks to be open. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with those singles cards from a pricing perspective, but I am a huge, huge fan of Surging Sparks. Not surprised to see it on here. And then we get the 2025 Black Star promo. So we're just going to have to see what other sets are up there, but I'm starting to feel really good about the list. This is really a who's who of the most recent stuff, right? You got 151, you got Prismatic Evolutions, you got Journey Together, you got Destined Rivals. Like, we're talking about some really awesome sets that are starting to be represented here in the most graded area. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about here is the most graded subjects, and believe it or not, every single character that's on the list this month was on it last month. We almost never see that happen. Very, very rarely do we see no movement at all, and I think that just goes to show you that I think the hobby and the cards are starting to settle a little bit. You know, we've got some of our big names that are starting to, you know, kind of form a little bit of stability, if you will, but then the fact that Pikachu has been #1 over Charizard. I mean, we've done this video series for literally years now, and Charizard was the boring one. It was always number one by a margin. But look at the lead that Pikachu had over Charizard last month. We're talking about a 15,000 card lead in terms of grading volume. That is the biggest lead we've seen in as far back as I can remember, and it is just incredible. Now, I do think we're going to have some big Charizard sets that are going to be coming out in the near future, right? Obviously, we're all talking about it. I've done some content on it, so I think we're going to see a lot of momentum in the Charizard space here relatively soon, but good for Pikachu. Very excited to see Pikachu rank as high as it has for as long as it has. And then everything's pretty much the same top to bottom. I mean, whenever you hear me talk about big name Pokemon from big sets, like, this is the list that I'm almost always referencing. And it doesn't mean that if a character isn't on this list, they don't have strong long-term price appreciation potential. Doesn't mean that at all. But this certainly shows you what people are sending to PSA, and it's a very good indicator of cards that have a lot of momentum in the hobby right now. Next thing that we're talking about right here, and as I always say, take this with a gigantic grain of salt, but this is the gem rates by era for the 4 big grading companies. You have PSA, Beckett, SGC, and CGC. It's broken down between sports and TCG. Obviously, we care about the TCG space, and it's really interesting. I talked earlier about how the Japanese grading volume has come down and the English grading volume has gone up. Well, guess what happens with the gem rate in the TCG space? As English flexes up and Japanese flexes down, the overall gem rate comes down. Why? Because we know that those Japanese cards are printed on a whole nother level when it comes to quality. The PSA 10s just rain from up above over there in Japan, and here in the English versions, we don't get that quite so much. We have terrible gem rates. We're talking about 30%. We're lucky if we have a set that comes out with a 40% gem rate nowadays. So as English flexes down and Japanese flexes up, obviously then you have gem rates go up, and the conversely when that happens, which we've seen this month, so PSA's gem rate is coming down. The other thing to call out, you'll see irrationally high grades there at Beckett, but remember, people are not sending a lot of cards to Beckett right now. Those who are black label chasing, so the very best of the best goes to Beckett. And then CGC is another interesting one. There was a while there where month after month their gem rate was up in the 60+% range. Over the last 2 months, it's come down to 53-ish range, which I feel like is much more approachable. So I don't dig too much into this. I think you should grade with who you want to. Don't pick a grading company because you think you have a better chance of getting, you know, a 10 with that company. I just always say grade with who makes you happy and who you think is going to give you the best long-term opportunity for success in the hobby. And then the final thing, listen, I talk about it. This is how I end it every single month. But I just want to say, I feel really, really good about what's going on, not just in the Pokemon space, but in the broader card space. Remember, like, we all benefit when One Piece and Lorcana and baseball and basketball and football and obviously Pokemon, like, we just want the card space to be very strong. And when you look at this graph here, I did a trend line, bottom left all the way up to the upper right of that graph. You can see that even though we feel like things have been growing aggressively, it's been a very smooth climb in terms of grading volume there at PSA. So again, 1.67 cards graded last month. That is insane. That is the highest they've ever done. You can see it's up 31% versus July of 2024, up 17% of June of 2025, and they graded about 54,000 cards per day. Again, I'm not scared of this. I lived through the junk wax era. This does not feel like the junk wax era. There's just not enough product out there for this to be a junk slab era, like hard stop. Even if everybody sent everything through, there's just not enough stuff to send through, so I promise you we're going to be okay in the long run. But I hope you enjoyed the content. I hope you had a ton of fun. I know it's a little bit dry, but I try and make it as fun as I can, and I feel like it's incredibly important we talk about this. So if you had fun and you made it to the end, hit that subscribe button or give us a thumbs up. Those two things go a long way in helping my small channel out, and I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you later, everybody. See ya. Bye.